Welcome back to the Camp Memories podcast from Kramer to the Hill. We are pleased to bring you part one of our three-part conversation with Nili Kosmal, who came to Camp Hess Kramer in the early 1970s and brought her wonderful talent to Israeli dancing and the creation of musical production. In part one, we talk with Nili about her childhood in Israel and how she got to the United States and how she started her career at camp. Enjoy. Hello again, and welcome back to Camp Memories from Kramer to the Hill. I'm Paul Roberts. That's Dr. Paul Schneider. And Catherine Roberts is not with us today, but she will be back for a future episode. And we would like to welcome our guest, Nili Kosmal. Hello, Nili. How are you?
I'm very fine. Thank you very much. Looking forward to this interview.
Great.
First of all, Nili, it's so good to see you. I've seen you a couple times over the last few years only, but it's been far too long. So I'm so happy to see you this morning. And we're so happy to get a chance to talk to you like this. So I'd like to begin. Please tell the viewers where you grew up in Israel, what your childhood was like, and tell us if you ever had an experience yourself like anything like summer camp during your upbringing.
Actually, I was born in a small town in Israel in the middle between Haifa and Tel Aviv. It was a little town called Hadera. To my father, who was a pioneer, and my mother, they came in the 1920s. They met in Hadera. My father came to dry the land from swamps. And my mother came also to try to help building the country. So just starting a little bit earlier, when she came from Poland, from Lodz, she went to a youth movement when she was young called Hashomer HaTzair, which is a Zionist youth movement. She had to go on the weekends and learn how to dig the ground, how to work the ground. And so it was very unusual for her. But anyways, my father built his own home. I had a wonderful childhood, although it was around the, World War II and the Depression. Was a very difficult time. I just remember one little story that my younger brother, Dror, was just a baby, and my mother had to go to the black market to buy one apple because this is all he could eat. So she had to peel the green apple and mash the rest of the apple. And that's the way she fed him. I took the skin of the apple, and I saved it, and I had one piece in a day so it would last long because they could not afford an apple. So this was the time I grew up, but I did not know any difference. And it was just a wonderful experience as a young girl. My mother took me to my first ballet lessons when I was 16. Then at age 7, I started playing the piano, which I did for about 10 years. And then also I had art. I have all sorts of after-school programs, despite the fact that it was a little difficult. So this was my childhood. Also, I loved to grow plants, flowers. We had a kitchen coop, and I used to go in the morning to the chicken coop, and I picked eggs, and I made hole on both sides, and I was just sipping it. This was just a nice breakfast for me. And I did it sometimes twice a day. So that is my childhood. Then I grew up basically in Hadera until I was 18, with lots of nature around me. It's not Hadera of today. Hadera of today is all buildings, and it's a big city. During my childhood, it was just like a farmland. There were trees. We played Tarzan on the trees. So we really spent a lot of time outdoor playing and socializing with our friends. until the age 18. And of course, when I was 18, you know that everybody's drafted to the army, including women at the time. I did do something very special. I went to some sort of test for before the army. I wanted to be in an army theater group, and I had to go through audition. And then when I was accepted, actually I was accepted before the army started, so I knew as I entered the army after basic training that I can spend the rest of the 2 years in the army theater group, where we basically did musical productions with the best directors and performers and the musicians. We had a wonderful music director, Ariel Levanon, who at the time was very well known, and the best poets, the song writers in Israel wrote melodies, including Naomi Shemer, as you know, was very well known, and she worked with us. So it was a very exciting period during the army. That's my childhood there. And then after that, I went to the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, where I studied Hebrew literature and Hebrew grammar. I wanted to be a teacher. And then that was my life in Israel until I was 22. And then I came to the United States.
So you really packed in a lot of information there, Nearly. That was a wonderful answer. Thank you very much. So you mentioned that the Hadera of today is not like the Hadera of your childhood, and that Israel has really grown up as a nation and changed an awful lot. I'm sure you've had many opportunities to go back to Israel. Please tell us a little bit what it's like when you go back.
Well, first, actually, I decided to, it was also very unusual. I did a lot of unusual things in my life. At my time, as a student, I decided before getting settled in Israel, I will take a trip to the United States. I wanted to study abroad just in the United States to learn something about the rest of the world, because I knew that once I get married, which actually my parents were hoping for, and also at that time I had a kind of fiancé that was hoping for, I wanted to see what else is there in the world. So that was the first time I had to do it secretly for a long time, trying to get in touch with universities in the United States. I spent a lot of time in the library at that time, looking for universities, and one of them was UCLA. And I tried to send them all my applications to quite a few universities. And I was accepted to UCLA, so I knew this was one of them that I would be interested, although I tried, as I said, with many others. But finally, when I settled here, I think I came to UCLA as a junior, and I started studying television producing and directing, because in Israel at that time, it was when the television actually just started. So we had a lot of support from the Israeli consulate to study. And my plan was to study, graduate, and go back to Israel, not to stay here. Well, life had a different plan for me. I think on the first day that I was at UCLA, I met a guy by the name of Nili Kosmal. It was very funny. Actually, it was not during my school time. It was during orientation at UCLA. To get the foreign students to know what to do and where to go and how to get involved with the community. And we had a big party at the rec center at UCLA on the last day of the orientation. And it was an evening with dancing, and I came with one foreign student whom I hardly knew. The main part of it was dancing and eating. Well, you know what's in the rec. In the rec center at UCLA, it's the best pool there is. And I love swimming. And you know what? I had a bathing suit in my bag. I just go with this like an ID card. I don't leave it. Well, if everybody was dancing, I went swimming. And who else do you think was there? That was Eddie. Well, this was just the very beginning, but later on, as you know, 2 years later, we got married. In terms of going to Israel, at the first part, I told my parents were very unhappy that I left because although I had two brothers, I was the only daughter. And, my father always said, why did you have to go all the way to Los Angeles? Why couldn't you, select Paris or London so we could come a little more often? And truly, at that time, it was very, very difficult, very expensive. And for a student as myself, it wasn't easy. I had not been visiting Israel for about 4 years. At that time, I was married to Eddie. And the first time we went to Israel, it was a big shock to me because all the buildings, all the development that was done, the freeways, it was not like this when I left 4 years before. Very unusual. And this was our first visit. And then after that, we went to visit pretty much every other year. One time I went actually, Mickey was 3 years old. Mickey was 3 and Danny was a year and a half old. And I went by myself to visit, which was one of the most difficult times. My mother luckily took care of the two babies, really. But, because of time changes, they could not understand why in the middle of the night, they woke up, they wanted to go play and eat. And so it was a very difficult time for me. But, since I had two brothers in Israel, it was always a joy to be with the families. And I missed a lot of my friends. So my parents actually came here twice. But, you saw the country developing. You saw Israel becoming more of like a metropolitan country, state with everything that was there. So that was my previous experience with going to Israel. The last time I went to Israel was last April, actually almost a year ago. And I went to see the devastation that was done in October 7th war. I went to those areas and it was a very, very difficult trip to me. It was not only devastation in the loss of people and loss of so many areas and the fight, the sadness and the emotions of citizens in Israel was really low. It affected me terribly. And I came back, I talk to my brother now pretty much every day, sometimes twice a day. And he says, oh, I hear another siren. I have to go to the shelter. And he lives on the kibbutz, and his apartment does not have a shelter. So they have to go every time to the shelter, which is it's a minute and a half away, but you have to go sometime, many times at night, when it's not very easy, or you just go to sleep and then all of a sudden the siren, you got to get dressed quickly and run to the shelter. So it is now very difficult for Israelis. But
So, Neely, what was your first experience working with Israeli dance in the United States? Who had you worked with, and what were the lasting effects that actually taught you as you started essentially what was a long career at camp.
That's true. I did start with dance, but I got to tell you that actually, when I was at the Hebrew University, I already was teaching Israeli folk dance. In addition, I was performing in a folk dance group, the Hebrew University folk dance group. That was another one of my hobbies. And one thing I did not mention before is when I came to the United States to study at UCLA, I paid a non-residential tuition, which was enormous. I did not have as much money. I came here with $400 in my pocket that I decided that I will just keep in case I need to go back home if I don't find a job. Well, thanks to relatives of mine that I actually found just before I came, helped me get my first job here at Stephen S. Wise Temple as not only a dance teacher, but I was teaching Hebrew, and I was teaching and going to school. But again, because of the expense, I went one quarter. They just started quarters at UCLA. Before that, it was semesters. So I studied one quarter and worked quite a few hours. And then one quarter I just worked. And then another quarter I studied, another quarter I just worked. So this way I made enough money to support myself for the time of being here. That was why I started teaching then, and not only this, but I was looking for other jobs, and I went to Hillel at UCLA, and I got a very nice job at Hillel, being the director of a dance company, a folk dance company. Somebody else was teaching folk dance at that time. So I started a folk dance company through Hillel. And I got mostly students, Jewish students from, actually there was one Mormon that joined the group. I had a very large group. I had about, first I started with 14. I ended up with like 24 people in my dance group. And we started performing for special events, Jewish events actually, was the Israeli Bond Office and Hadassah and bar bat mitzvahs, when people had enough money to make it more Israeli event. So I choreographed their dances, and many times I performed. And then the second year, I decided to enlarge it even more, and I created a dance group here called the Suburb Dancers. That was, we had costumes and we had lots of performances at that time. So this was a major job of my work as a dancer, as a choreographer. I still had to work in a few more places. I worked in Temple Judea in Terzana. I worked in Leo Baeck Temple. I worked in Worship Boulevard Temple. I worked in Temple Israel in Hollywood, in Temple Isaiah. So I did a lot of folk dance teaching. Okay, I was teaching folk dances and then still having the dance group. Well, by that time, raising two young children. So this was the beginning of my folk dance teaching. My first job, you asked me about camp experience, and this is one of those things. In Israel, my parents could never afford letting me go to a summer camp. It was out of the question. So what I did in Israel, I became a counselor for just day camp. But when I came here, I started looking for summer camps. And through my relative and Rabbi Zeldin, they introduced me to Rabbi Joe Glazer at Camp Swig in Saratoga. And he hired me to be the dance director at Camp Swig. And I was there for 1 year, for the whole summer. And then the second year, after I got married, it was a little difficult to go all the way to Camp Swig. So they made me the dance director. They had the Chagiga program. So I started choreographing for the Chagiga program, for the events. We performed on television there in the Bay Area. And this was like my first experience as a camp. And I was there for 4 summers at camp. It became a little more difficult to go to Camp Swig. And then I started getting at Camp Swig some campers that 1 month they went to Camp Hess Kramer, another month they went to Camp Swig. They told me about Camp Hess Kramer. And then I said, well, who is the director? They said, Steve Brewer. So very shortly after finding out, I called Wilshire Boulevard and I asked, I wanted to speak to Steve Brewer. And so Steve said, yeah, we would love to have you, but we don't want to have any problem with Camp Swig. And I said, no, don't worry about, I told them that I'm leaving. I will not tell them that it's because of you. So this is how I moved after 4 years of Camp Swig in Saratoga. I came to Camp Hess Kramer. My first year was when Mickey, my eldest, was 1 year old. And it was just a delight for me. I loved camp. I loved camp from the start. I used to have dance sessions right among the trees.
That was part one of our three-part conversation with Nili Kosmal, who taught Israeli dancing and musical production at Camp Hess Kramer for 18 summers. Please subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss when part two comes out, where we talk about Nili's favorite musical productions at camp and more. Don't forget to mark your calendars for camp's upcoming events in Carlsbad this summer, including Shabbat 75 on Friday, July 24th, and Leadership Night on Saturday, July 25th, and the Back to Our Roots event at Camp Hess Kramer in Malibu on Sunday, August the 30th. And if you haven't heard from camp in a while, you can update your contact info by visiting wptcamps.org/alumni/update your info, which is linked down in the description. And that's how you'll be able to hear when registration opens for all the events. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.